Ready.
All right, cool. And we are on. Welcome to Over 50 Starting Over, everybody. This is a special guest edition, and I'm Barry Edwards.
And I'm Merle Garrison.
And with our special guest edition, we just like to bring you very interesting subject matter. And in this case, we think it has a very a national impact. And I'd like to say, please see us at over50startingover.com, spelled out, no numerals, and to sign up and subscribe to your favorite channels. So whether it's Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, whatever it may be, maybe you want to see the original YouTube video. It is all there. Merle, please welcome our guest and tell us a bit about him.
Well, first off, I want to say this, that I have the distinct pleasure of having two of my best friends on the show right now, and that is actually something that is extremely uncommon. We're going to talk to Rex M. Lee today, and Rex and I go back a long time, almost as far as Barry and I go back, so it's going to be a fun show. Let me tell you a little bit about Rex. He has just finished putting together two articles for the Vision Times called Hybrid Warfare. There's a part 1 and there's a part 2. The first part is called Are You Prepared? And the second part is called The Rise of Soft Authoritarianism. And a bit of Rex's background: he's a cybersecurity and privacy advisor and a tech journalist. He's the founder of My Smart Privacy and CyberTalk. Rex has written articles for the Epoch Times, MissionCritical Communications Magazine, the Wireless Messaging News, and the Vision Times. Rex is a former advisor to the Department of Homeland Security and also the National Security Agency, the NSA, and also the Senate and House Judiciary Committee. Rex has 35 years of tech and telecom experience. And just a side note here, Rex, I used to work for Rex in a couple of different venues. And so we've got some pretty cool sales war stories that we're not going to go into today, but had a lot of fun with this guy right here. Rex, let's start out with this. Can you define what hybrid warfare is for the audience?
Yeah, hybrid warfare simply means unconventional warfare. Unlike traditional warfare that's fought on a battlefield between two mechanized armies, hybrid warfare involves the use of technology, media, entertainment, propaganda mainly. So we're seeing that today. It's associated with the re-rise of great power competition between Russia, the United States, the United Kingdom, China, and the European nation and other nations. So basically what's going on today regarding hybrid warfare, we're seeing examples of that today, which I wrote about in my article, Hybrid Warfare, Are You Prepared? Such as the Putin's use of oil during the pandemic as a weapon. That's one example that's going on out there that we're all feeling it, especially here in Texas. It caused a price war with OPEC that's crushed the oil markets. The other distinct thing that's going on is with hybrid warfare that people don't understand is that everybody's a target in hybrid warfare, not just military people, but government officials, elected officials, entertainers, business professionals. We're seeing the theft of IP at record rates from countries such as China and Russia. And it's not only those countries that are taking IP. A lot of people don't realize this, but India also is out acquiring IP at a higher rate than China and Russia. So it's a lot of different aspects, and it's basically unconventional warfare. Even kids and civilians are targets in hybrid warfare.
Well, let's unpack that a little bit here, Rex, because you just gave a whole mouthful of stuff right there, and there's some good stuff in there. And let's start out with your first point about Russia having this price war with the OPEC nations right now. We're seeing gas prices right now at a low. And isn't that a good thing? I mean, shouldn't we be excited about the fact that there's this competition and now we're seeing lower gasoline prices?
It depends on how you look at that and the impact that it's going to have on our economy. We were the #1 oil producer in the world up until the COVID-19 outbreak. And that was a great opportunity for Russia to say, hey, look, let's go ahead and flood the market with oil and cause a price war so that we can drive America down. Now, to the consumer, oil, drive America's oil production down. And to the consumer, they may benefit, but long term, it could have a really bad impact on our economy.
Well, the fact is we see that about 5% of our workforce is tied to the oil industry, which is a ginormous amount of people. And we're seeing layoffs right now. I'm seeing recent reports right now that the unemployment rate is at 16%, or that's 1 in 6 individuals
Right.
in the workforce right now. And that a lot of that is tied to the oil industry. What would be the motivation for countries like Russia to do something like this, and how does that relate to hybrid warfare?
Okay, so it's basically spreading influence around the globe. So here's Russia and OPEC having this price war. It basically gives an opening for countries that are producing oil, including China and Russia, to gain market share against the U.S. So we're not thinking about that either. We saw this in the rise of great power competition pre-World War II when we embargoed the Japanese from getting oil through their invasion of China. It actually starts wars. These things actually will start wars. And those are the negative impacts of how these things can impact the everyday person. Eventually, we're going to feel this, and we may feel it in a loss of markets around the world if things don't get straightened out.
Rex, something that I find completely alarming that I think falls into the category of hybrid warfare is, as I recall, if I remember correctly, over 90% of our pharmaceuticals are made in China. We are completely dependent on them. Something happens to that and we can come crashing to our knees, and as an individual by individual basis, don't you think?
Yeah, it's not just pharmaceuticals. You have to look at our total supply chain. It's our tech, it's pharmaceuticals. It's really vital needs that we have. All of our tech and telecom infrastructure and products are being made over there in China. So if you look at pharmaceuticals, for instance, it's mainly of all things, it's antibiotics. That's a pretty important pharmaceutical. It's not just aspirin, but it's antibiotics. So again, through hybrid warfare, these things can be leveraged against us during trade talks. So if we want to, if we want to better our position at the trading table, they can easily cut our supply chain off, and we can't overnight repatriate that to the United States. So that gives them huge leverage over us, even in trade talks.
And talk about an unfair advantage. You touched on it, that we just take all of our most sophisticated technology and bring it all over there and have them manufacture it because it's so cheap, just giving them our intellectual property. That, I mean, just to rip off, it's a totally unfair advantage.
It is, and all this happened through our over the last 20 years. In the second article that I wrote, The Rise of Soft Authoritarianism, the Joint Chiefs of Staff Dunford touched based on this in an interview in the Atlantic. 20 years ago, China wasn't even mentioned in the strategic defense analysis for the United States. It was just mainly Russia and Russian proxies, such as Iran and so forth. Over the last 20 years, we made trading partners out of China during that period of time, and we've given them that foothold. And what they've given us in return basically is labor rates that I hate to use this terminology, but they're basically slave labor rates. And greedy business people and politicians took advantage of that, and they outsourced our manufacturing to China. And now we're paying the price. You're seeing it. We're paying the price. We see pre-installed surveillance technology within our infrastructure, telecom infrastructure that's being manufactured by companies like Huawei. We also see pre-installed Chinese surveillance technology within Samsung products, like a Galaxy Note phone that I did an analysis on for the Department of Homeland Security through a smartphone report that I gave to the Department of Homeland Security and the NSA, pointing out the fact that a a smartphone that I went down and bought from a T-Mobile corporate store in Selma, Texas, contained pre-installed surveillance technology developed by Baidu through Google. And I couldn't uninstall it, and it was attached to an app I couldn't not only uninstall, but or control. I couldn't disable the app. So I was basically being forced to be surveilled by a Chinese company through my smartphone. So we're seeing stories of this all day long. We're paying the price for that cheap labor.
You know, Rex, in both of your articles, you related this to the Art of War by Sun Tzu. And one of his comments that he has inside of the books, or one of his quotes, is the supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. The greatest victory is that which requires no battle. Now, this came out of the 5th century, so it's never more true than today, as we're seeing. Can you relate that to what's happening in Hong Kong and what we've seen here as it relates to us here in the United States and the defense of the Chinese government?
Yeah, that's a great point and a good question. So let me do a war game scenario. We all know, we're being told by the government that the spread of the coronavirus was due to somebody who ate a meal at a wet market, a Hunan wet market in Wuhan, China. So, and then the virus spread from there. Also, we're hearing conflicting reports that it came out of a lab through research, but it wasn't done intentionally. Either way, if you look at it, let's put it in perspective like a war game scenario and say it was done purposely, then there's a lot of benefits to this. And it's a virus with a low mortality rate. So, if it were just released in the host country's land first, it gives them an alibi. But the benefits are huge, such as it cleared the streets of protesters in Hong Kong without the optics of the Chinese military going in there and mowing people down and killing people. They can't do that anymore. They can't have another Tiananmen Square because of the supply chain connection. We're their customers. It doesn't look good for your customers if you're out killing citizens who are freely protesting. So the use of a virus in that instance would benefit a company like China. Also, again, it benefits a country like Russia in regards to oil and so forth. So we're seeing how it's being used. Whether it was done intentionally or not, it can be used that way.
Rex, talk about how the NBA got involved in this whole thing. There was an incident that happened, and I mean, this thing is affecting even our sports.
Yes, yeah. What we're seeing. All right, let me. This is a great point. So after World War II, we started doing a lot of manufacturing in Japan, and we were able to spread Western influence to Japan, and Japan started looking more westernized, and they started adopting more of a democracy, same in Germany and so forth. They were influenced by us after World War II, but we made great allies out of those countries and we built them up economically. What we're seeing now is that countries are starting to look more like China in regards to soft authoritarianism or the soft police state that we're seeing. And we see it through our corporations who bow down to the Chinese government that's ruled by the Chinese Communist Party. Let's not kid ourselves. The CCP is in charge here. And an example of that was the GM for the Rockets, when all he simply did was tweeted something to the effect that he was supporting the protesters in Hong Kong. And that not only sent the Rockets organization into a tailspin, it sent the whole NBA into a tailspin where they actually had to apologize to the Chinese government for somebody exercising their free speech here in the U.S., a United States citizen under the Constitution of the U.S., the GM of the Rockets, sent out a tweet, and he has every right to do so. Well, it turned around, he had to go delete that tweet, which is censorship, and then go and publicly apologize to the Communist Party of China. Are they more influenced by us? Are we being more influenced by them? And that is at the heart of the Art of War by Sun Tzu, where you can win battles without warfare. That's the supreme strategy, is to do that. And we're seeing that, and also to spread influence to other countries through actions that look favorable rather than negative.
Well, yeah, such as influencing the election. But isn't the entire entertainment industry influenced by China as well, just like the NBA? Could you speak
Well,
to that
this,
a little bit?
yeah, there are six major media organizations in the world have investment from China in them now. And we're seeing it in our movies. There's a company called Tencent, and they're the creators of the social media platform WeChat, which is the messaging app. Now, old people, I always joke when I speak at this at seminars, at trade shows. If you're over 25, you're still using WhatsApp. If you're under 25, you use WeChat, another social media platform that China has been promoting, or Chinese company ByteDance, which is TikTok. You're seeing that one. So again, if you're over 25, you're still using Facebook. If you're under 25, you're on TikTok. And so what we're seeing there is the influence of these social media platforms, and they're also used for propaganda purposes and so forth. So those platforms are developed to collect people's personal and professional information. They're no different than Facebook, and so they're used for surveillance purposes. But we're also seeing that governments are starting to police people through their use of social media and their connected products and so forth.
You know, Rex, we're seeing right now, like I just saw a news report. Actually, you connected us to a news report on one of your articles about the company, and I don't know if I can pronounce it right. Is it Huawei?
Huawei.
Huawei. Okay, so they're accused of actually stealing the trade secret theft and wire fraud and obstruction of justice by the FBI. The CFO, who happens to be the daughter of the founder, was recently arrested. But
Right.
we've seen this company before take down a very large organization called Nortel.
Yes.
Can you, I mean, why is it that we are still entrusting our businesses to these Chinese companies that are under the guise of the Chinese Communist Party?
So the Nortel story is a story that Google, Apple, and Facebook, and any other company that's doing business in China, including the NBA, should read that story. The Huawei had gone into Canada, and they formed a business relationship at one point with Nortel. And inadvertently, Nortel ended up giving their IP to that company, and it was basically the frog and the scorpion story, where Nortel took the scorpion upon its back and in the form of Huawei and paddled it across the river. And when it got across the river, it was stung. And Nortel was the largest, or one of the largest telecom infrastructure companies in the world, responsible for building telecom infrastructure all over the world, including wireless networks. And after it's all said and done, Huawei has assumed their position, and Nortel is out of business. They're not even in business anymore. And they were one of the companies that have been around for over 100 years. And now Huawei is the leading, or one of the leading 5G infrastructure manufacturers around the world. And this is huge. Well, if you do business in China, part of that pact before the new trade deal, which Trump says that this has changed, companies had to freely give their IP to China. So you got to understand that, Facebook is feeling it now because TikTok is starting to acquire all of the younger kids under 25 and young adults, as well as WeChat. And they're both Chinese companies, and they're annihilating Facebook with young people. And so they're starting to see it. So hopefully Mark Zuckerberg is looking at this going, maybe it's not so good to be doing business in China because they're getting their butts kicked by these two companies.
Well, you bring up 5G, Rex, and Huawei just did a big deal with Qualcomm, and really this has everything to do with our 5G infrastructure. But you also talk in your articles about being able to launch attacks over these types of networks. One thing I know about 5G is that it gives a lot more bandwidth so that you can do a lot more with artificial intelligence and machine learning and things like that. Talk about the threat that we're facing with something like that.
So I wrote an article for MissionCritical Communications called The Rise of Foreign Cybersecurity Threats. And basically one of the examples I gave in there, and this is horrifying. We all know apps and platforms are intrusive, and they collect our personal and professional information from our tech and telecom products such as smartphones. But what a lot of people don't realize is that nation state hackers and nation state military operations have learned that they can actually launch attacks on networks through apps. I'll give you an example. Google about 2 years ago pulled over 300 apps off their out of Google Play that could launch DDoS attacks on their networks. Again, Google and Apple had to pull more apps that were launching man-in-the-middle attacks. So about 2 years, we all heard about the drone attack in Saudi Arabia on the oil refinery. Well, coincidentally, I wrote an article just before that drone attack last summer on that Saudi oil field about another attack on that same Saudi oil refinery by malware called Triton Trissus. And it was developed by a nation state backed group of hackers called Sandworm and Telebots, and they're out of Russia. And they're allegedly also responsible for black energy that was released into Ukraine utilities to take down the power grid in Ukraine. Well, they morphed that capability in that app, and then they were able to take that app and then launch it back through the Microsoft OS that this oil refinery was using, and it went after their industrial control systems, and they were trying to turn things off that would blow up the oil refinery. And I happen to think that the drone attack was done by the same people, because we know that Yemen and Iran and these countries are just proxies to China and Russia. And I think it was the same group where they just said, let's just go old school and blow this up with drones, because they tried it through software and it didn't work. That's just my own opinion.
Well, you know, and you bring this up in your articles too. You're talking about nation states, and then you're talking about proxies to nation states. First off, maybe not everybody might not know what a nation state is, and maybe you could start by defining that. But next, you talked about the fact that these nation states don't want to wage direct conventional war with the Western allies, but Western allies may be forced into conventional war against these proxy states. Explain that a little bit more, Rex.
Well, that's nothing new. After post-World War II, this started in Korea and Vietnam, and Eisenhower actually warned us about the government industrial military complex. If you go back to his 61 or 62 speech and watch it, it's jaw-dropping. And since Korea, that's been it. A lot of people said, well, World War III hasn't happened. In my opinion, World War III has been the Cold War, and we're still in it. And it's been fought through proxy. Just because Russia changed their political affiliation from communism to socialism doesn't mean that they're still not beholden to those ideas. And they're still using proxies. We see it now in Syria, and we've seen it over the years. And going back to General Dunford and the National Security Defense Strategy in the 90s, they were talking about those very proxies, and we were seeing that with Iraq, Iran, and how these state actors become bad actors through influence from Russia and China. And we've seen all these skirmishes, whether it was Vietnam, the Gulf War in 91, 9/11, Iraq, and so forth, all the way to today. We're seeing it done through proxies, because like in the art of war or hybrid warfare, the major players in all this, the US, China, and Russia, just don't want to go head to head against each other. So it's being done through proxy and hybrid warfare, frankly.
Rex, fascinating stuff. We're now seeing our political system with more parity than we've ever seen in my lifetime. It seems like the president says one thing, and immediately the opposing party, throws them, just trashes them immediately. We're seeing where there are heavy investments into the Chinese market by some of these people in politics that are opposing our president, while the president was actually trying to leverage a trade deal with China. We also saw where the president was attacked with a false charge of collusion with the Russian government. Then the Ukraine thing came up and the impeachment. And right away, right after that happened, COVID-19. What are your thoughts around the timing of all of that and the investments that seem to be pretty staggering that are coming from the attackers of the president and his plan?
Well, let's go pre-Trump one more time. I'll use Al Gore as an example. At Houdini Soft, we developed an algorithm that would unlock over 600 makes and models of smartphones and regular feature phones or traditional cellular telephones. And it enabled a user to go into a store and reprovision and unlock their phone. The street terms for that is jailbreaking and flashing, but we did it at an enterprise level, and we built platforms for Metro PCS and Cricket. So I reached out in 2008 or 9. Al Gore was speaking at CTIA, the wireless telecom industry show, and I wanted to reach out to Al Gore about our technology because it was green. And we were at that time we were being fought by Apple and AT&T in the wireless industry to have our application flashing and jailbreaking made illegal through the Digital Millennium Copyright Act. And we were fighting these big companies. And I thought, well, there's not a greener app than allowing somebody to reprovision their phone on a network. We have 100% a recycle rate with that user. And I got all the way to almost getting an appointment with Al Gore. And then they realized that I was working for Houdini Soft, and Al Gore was on the board of Apple. And he's been on the board of Kleiner Perkins, who are the biggest investors in Google, Apple, and all these technologies. Come to find out, they're doing their manufacturing through a company called Foxconn that has big operations in Taiwan and in China. So, so somebody recycling their phone means that that's one less Apple iPhone that's going to get purchased. And Al Gore killed it right there. And I thought, well, God, first of all, this guy preaches about the environment and that we should cut our carbon footprints. But some of these Foxconn factories have over 200,000 employees, and they work 10 deep, and they work 24/7. And these people are actually killing themselves. But it seems to be okay with Al Gore, who sits on the board or sat on the board at Apple at one time, to have those devices manufactured over in China and Taiwan and have those carbon footprints that are probably the size of South Texas. Each one of those plants go 24/7, but don't bring that manufacturing over to the US and pay people a living rate for that and use the environment as an excuse. That's just that's one example of hypocrisy there. Joe Biden's son also had business interests in China as well, aside from the Ukraine. And that also gets brushed under as well. And plus Nancy Pelosi and her husband have big influence, big interest in China as well. So, you just see the hypocrisy right there, and they're attacking the president on these trade deals and everything. I don't know if these people are employed by China or they're employed, or if they're, I don't know if their loyalty is to the US more or China or their back pockets more. I don't know. So
That's very interesting. It's a very interesting question. And we're going to have to wind this up. We only have a couple of minutes left. But hey, I really have to say, I just want to mention on a personal level, you've gone through quite a few health scares with cancer. And you've overcome an awful lot. I want to congratulate you for that. That has to be a hell of a thing to go through. And also want to ask you, how do people get in touch with you to learn more about about your articles, get your articles, and maybe reach out to you and ask you a question?
Oh, well, they can find my articles on my website, www.mysmartprivacy.com. So it's mysmartprivacy, www.mysmartprivacy.com. Or they can email me at rlee@mysmartprivacy.com.
All right, thank you. Hey, Merle, do you have any final question? Again, we literally have a minute or two.
One last question that I have for you. You mentioned these social media platforms and being able to surveil those. What is the threat to our young people today that are using those?
Well, it's a threat to companies. If I'll give you an example, it's not only a threat to the user, but it's a threat to a company. So let's say one of your employees has TikTok on their phone, but you have a BYOD program with your employees who are utilizing that phone. Well, that app and that platform has app permissions associated with it that allows them to collect your contacts, your calendar events, your text messages. It gives them access to control the sensors on the phone, such as the accelerometer, so that they know when you're sitting, walking, and everything. So it's basically the total collection of that information. Not only that, they can build a data profile on that person. So later on in life, let's just say that person starts to rise politically, but they were doing things that they thought were private to themselves and sending messages out to people that they thought were private. And suddenly those messages make it back into the public square, and that person's career is blowing up because they become a threat to these entities. Also, imagine this. Imagine pre-World War II, if the Deutsche Telekom could surveil and data mine everybody by their telephones in the US and do it for financial gain. Not only would Deutsche Telekom from Germany would have been able to fund the war effort of Germany, but think of the intelligence that the Nazi Party and Hitler would have gained on everybody if they could monitor people through their telephones. Well, people forget that their smartphone is no less significant than their home or office phone and PC, yet they're allowing as many as 30 or more companies from around the world, including companies from Russia and China, to surveil and data mine them through the apps on their phone, in which they're using as their phone and PC today, because nobody frankly uses their home or office phone and PC much anymore. We're all using our smartphones. So we've given access to these adversarial, these companies from adversarial countries such as Russia and China. We've given them access to our telephones and our PCs, and I'm doing shows on that for CyberTalk. If we're going to be doing a lot of episodes on this as well for CyberTalk.
And don't forget, people are voluntarily bringing Alexa into their homes.
Oh.
Isn't that something? Yeah, that is something else. We talked a bit about that, and we'll continue to talk about it. But we got to wind this up right now. And Rex, just loved having you on. Thank you very much. Vital information.
Thank you for having me on. Thank you.
Thank you.
You guys do a great job. I love your show, by the way. I've been pushing y'all out through my LinkedIn to everybody and
appreciate
information out. So
thank you so much. And Merle and I will see you all on Friday. Okay, we're out. Thank you.